disappointed were you that you were the second man on the moon and not the first?
I like to be associated with the fact that I was on the first lunar landing mission instead of being the second man to walk on the moon.
At 1960, Buzz Aldrin has become the center of a viral storm that refuses to die.
Hi, I'm Buzz Aldrin, the one that went to the moon. Quite frankly, forget the moon.
Headlines claim he finally broke his silence with 4 chilling words. They're not humans. But did the second man to walk on the moon actually confess something hidden for decades? Or are we watching the internet bend history into clickbait? If you stared into space and saw something that didn't belong, would you speak up or stay quiet forever? But before we judge the headlines, what exactly was that strange light pacing Apollo 11 in 1969?
The 3 astronauts of Apollo 11 are in their last days of preparation for man's first attempt to visit the moon.
The light on the horizon. And that question matters because in 1969 there was no room for vibes, only math, oxygen, fuel, and 3 men inside a machine that had to behave perfectly, thousands of miles from the nearest help. Apollo 11 was already past the point of comfort. The roar of launch was gone, Earth was shrinking into a marble, and the spacecraft had entered that strange in-between phase where the job is mostly waiting, listening, and not making mistakes. And then came the moment conspiracy videos love to freeze frame and whisper about. A light, not a cinematic beam, not a spinning saucer, just something bright enough to stand out, suspended in the black like a stubborn ember. For a few minutes, it seemed to move with them. Sit with that. You're traveling thousands of miles per hour, nearly 200,000 miles from home, surrounded by endless darkness. When something bright appears in that darkness, your brain goes to work. It wants a label. It wants control. It wants a story. If you were in that cabin, would you trust your eyes or your instruments? And honestly, would your first thought be space debris or something is watching us? Here's what actually happened and why the alien ship version collapses under scrutiny. Earlier in the mission, Apollo 11 performed crucial maneuvers called transposition, docking, and extraction.
Unofficial time off the surface at 1:11:37:32.
Okay, the hatch is closed and latched.
The command module separated, turned around, and docked with the lunar module, which had been stored inside a protective structure called the Spacecraft Lunar Module Adapter. To retrieve it, that adapter opened, and its panels detached, drifting away into space.
And we are venting something. We are venting something out into space.
Imagine a mechanical flower opening, each petal floating off into sunlight. Those panels were large and reflective. In direct sunlight, they could flash like mirrors. If one drifted nearby at the right angle, it could appear as a steady light moving alongside the spacecraft, especially since both objects were following similar trajectories just after separation. This explanation is not pulled from a random blog. It came from Buzz Aldrin himself during a 2014 Reddit AMA. He described seeing a light that appeared to travel with them and made clear there were logical explanations more reasonable than another spacecraft from another world. He pointed to likely sources, the separated rocket stage or the 4 adapter panels released during extraction. At that moment, the object was unidentified, only in the sense that they had not confirmed which piece of hardware it was. That is very different from declaring it alien. Unidentified is a temporary status. Alien is a conclusion. Now consider why the light felt like it was pacing them. Relative motion in space is deceptive. If 2 objects move in similar directions at similar speeds, they can appear locked together, like cars traveling side by side on a highway. One seems to follow the other, even if both are simply coasting. The stars in the background offer little help because they are so distant that they barely shift. Your brain grabs the wrong reference point, and suddenly a drifting panel feels like a pursuer. So what was it? A bright object seen during translunar flight, unidentified at the moment. How did it shine? By reflecting sunlight off large metallic surfaces, either from the adapter panels or the separated rocket stage. Where was it? outside the spacecraft, close enough in line of sight to appear as though it was moving with them. Why did it happen? Because Apollo 11 created its own debris when parts separated. The mission left hardware behind, and in sunlight, hardware can sparkle. Here's the quiet detail often skipped. Buzz did not claim aliens. He explained mechanics. He resisted mystery. Coverage at the time emphasized the same grounded interpretation. The object was likely connected to hardware the crew had just released. The light on the horizon was not a visitor from another galaxy. It was sunlight on human engineering, drifting through space like a floating mirror. But once the internet decides you saw something, it rarely stops at "you saw something." It wants a secret. It wants a confession. It wants the moment the hero cracks. So, if it was just a rocket panel, why did the world become convinced Buzz passed a lie detector test about aliens 50 years later? The anatomy of a digital hoax. Here's the part that should make you lean closer to the screen. That lie detector test everyone keeps repeating was not a real machine. Buzz sat down. Nobody strapped sensors to his chest. Nobody asked him questions in a controlled room. The test was basically a software program doing voice analysis on old audio, and then someone dressed the results up like courtroom truth. And once you see the blueprint, you can't unsee it. The story really took off in 2018, when tabloid-style headlines started bouncing around the internet claiming Buzz passed a lie detector test about seeing aliens. The hook was perfect for algorithms, a legend, a secret, and a dramatic finally telling the truth angle. But the receipts didn't match the headline. The claim came from a method that gets described as bioacoustic frequency analysis. In plain language, it means someone ran a program on recordings of Buzz speaking, then claimed the stress patterns in his voice proved he was hiding something. Now pause for a second and really think about that. If a computer decides you sound stressed, does it automatically mean you're lying? Or could it mean you're an older man being pushed toward sensational questions on camera about a topic you have spent decades correcting? That's the first trick of the misinformation assembly line. It doesn't start with "Buzz said aliens." It starts with "Buzz sounded stressed." That tiny shift matters because it quietly moves the story from facts into vibes. And once you're in vibe territory, anyone can sell you anything. The second trick is editing. There's an older interview clip that gets recycled constantly, usually presented like Buzz is reluctantly admitting he saw something not human. But when fact-checkers looked at the full context, the viral versions were missing the setup and the explanation. The parts where he clarifies what the crew saw and how they thought about it are either cut down or cut out entirely. It's like taking a full conversation and only keeping the awkward pause, then calling the pause a confession. Have you noticed how these clips always end right when you want the answer? That's not an accident. That's manufacturing suspense. And here's where it gets even more slippery. Once a misleading clip is out, it gets verified by repetition. One blog references another blog. A tabloid headline becomes a TikTok caption. Then someone narrates it over dramatic music and says, "Experts are convinced." Which experts? Where? Doing what exactly? That's another little trick. The word experts becomes a costume anyone can wear. Reuters, the Associated Press, and PolitiFact have all tackled versions of this claim and came to the same conclusion. The lie detector narrative is not legit, and the alien claim is not backed by what Buzz actually said. They point out that he did describe seeing an unidentified object during Apollo 11, but unidentified in the moment is not the same thing as alien, especially when the likely explanation involves things the mission itself released into space. So why does this hoax keep working? Because it hits two cravings at once. People want mystery, and they want a hero to validate the mystery. Buzz is not just any name. He's Apollo 11. He's history in a spacesuit. When a story claims he's breaking silence, it feels like a vault door opening. It feels like forbidden truth leaking out. And that's why the hoax doesn't just misquote him. It rebrands him. It turns a careful engineer into a trembling witness. It takes a technical answer and swaps it with a spooky headline because spooky headlines travel faster. Let me ask you something that sounds simple, but cuts deep. Does a computer program really have the right to tell us what a man is thinking? Especially when he never consented to that analysis. And why are we so desperate for a cover-up that we ignore the boring truth, even when it comes directly from the person who lived it? Because the real assembly line is not just bad editing, it's emotional editing. It edits your expectations. It erodes your trust. It edits what you think you're allowed to believe. And now we get to the twist that makes this whole story feel like a magic trick you almost fell for. What if I told you the quote, "they're not human," does exist, but it was never said about our moon? The Phobos. Twist. Geography of a lie. Because yes, the quote exists. The monolith moment is real footage. The problem is where the internet decided to place it.
Houston, we have a problem. We have a main bus B undervolt.
This is the sneakiest kind of lie, the kind that doesn't invent a sentence. It relocates it, like taking a street sign from Nairobi and planting it in New York, then acting shocked when directions don't make sense. And once you notice it, you realize most viral space conspiracies don't need new evidence. They just need bad geography and confident editing. Here's what actually happened. Buzz did an interview while talking about space exploration, and at one point, he brought up a strange object people call a monolith. That word is gasoline online. It sounds like ancient aliens, secret bases, and Stanley Kubrick vibes. So creators grab that clip, slap "moon" in the caption, and add eerie music, and suddenly the story becomes Buzz Aldrin admits there's a monolith on the moon. But he wasn't talking about our moon. He was talking about Phobos, one of the two small moons of Mars. Not Luna, not the Apollo 11 landing site, not some hidden structure behind a crater on the moon you can see with a telescope. It's a different world, a different moon, a different conversation. And this is where the lie becomes almost clever, because most people don't automatically separate the moon from a moon. In normal speech, we treat those as the same thing. The internet takes advantage of that tiny language gap and turns it into a whole conspiracy. Let's slow it down and make it crystal clear. When people say the moon, they mean Earth's moon, Luna. That's where Apollo 11 went in 1969. It's close enough that humans made it there with 1960s tech, and close enough that every sentence about it feels emotionally personal. It's our cosmic neighbor, but Mars has moons too. Two of them, Phobos and Deimos. They are smaller and weirder, and they orbit Mars like fast-moving companions. Phobos is the famous one in this story because it has a big rock that stands out in photos, casting a sharp shadow that makes it look extra dramatic. People call it the Phobos monolith, but in plain language, it's basically a big boulder, a natural feature that looks oddly rectangular from certain angles. Now ask yourself this. If you saw a giant lonely rock on a tiny Martian moon, wouldn't you be curious too? Wouldn't you want to send a robot, take close-up pictures, measure it, and just settle it? That's the spirit Buzz was speaking from. Not fear, not confession, curiosity. In the real context, Buzz is essentially doing what he's done for decades, pushing people to think beyond one historic moment and toward the next frontier. He talks like a man who still wants humanity to move, build, explore, and not get stuck worshipping the past. And when he mentions the monolith, it's not, "I saw aliens." It's, "Hey, there's a weird feature out there, and when people see it, they're going to ask questions. So let's go look." That's not a cover-up. That's a challenge. So how did that become Buzz reveals a secret on the moon? Easy. A creator takes the clip, removes the words Mars and Phobos from the surrounding conversation, then re-uploads it with a caption that says moon. The audience hears monolith, sees Buzz's face, and their brain fills in the rest with Apollo memories, moon landing conspiracies, and that old craving for a hidden truth nobody else is brave enough to say. It's the same assembly line we talked about in Chapter 2. Strip context and add drama, and let viewers do the connecting for you. And it works because it uses a psychological shortcut. People trust place names less than they trust emotions. If the clip feels like a confession, it doesn't matter where it actually happened. That's how a Mars moon becomes a moon landing secret. Have you ever been excited about a future discovery, only to realize someone used your words to lie about the past? And if the internet can move a monolith from Mars to the moon with one caption, what else has it quietly relocated to keep you watching? Now, here's the deeper twist. And this is where your script gets that fresh value. This isn't just a mistake, it's a pattern. Buzz has spent years talking about Mars. Mars as a destination. Mars is a long-term plan. Mars is a step that forces humans to get serious about survival, technology, and cooperation. That vision is honestly more intense than most alien stories because it's real, it's hard, and it demands sacrifice. But Buzz wants us to prepare for Mars doesn't go viral like Buzz admits aliens are on the moon. So the internet hijacks his excitement, paints it as fear, and sells it back to you as scandal. And you can even hear the difference in his tone when he talks about the Apollo 11 light versus the monolith conversation. The Apollo moment was cautious and technical because they were on a mission and had to stay calm. The monolith talk is future-focused, almost playful curiosity, because he's inviting you into exploration, not panic. That's why the geography matters, because when you put the quote in the correct place, the meaning changes completely. On the moon, the internet wants it to mean, we were not alone. On Phobos, it actually means, we have more to discover, and we should go look. So the monolith wasn't a hidden moon base. It was a mislabeled Mars conversation, a lie built out of a true clip and a false location. And now the story finally returns to the question that matters for the rest of this video. If Buzz isn't hiding aliens on the moon, what is he actually trying to tell us about the future of the human race? The real silence, a hero's legacy. Because once you put the monolith back on Phobos, where it belongs, something else becomes obvious. The internet keeps trying to trap this man inside 1969, like a fly in amber, frozen in one heroic moment forever. But that's not where his mind lives. The truth is, he isn't silent about the moon. He's been talking for decades. The real silence people feel is actually disappointment that he won't play the role they wrote for him. He won't act scared. He won't hint at secret alien meetings. He won't give the camera that dramatic pause that turns into a thumbnail. And when you think about his life, that makes perfect sense. He came up in an era where space wasn't a vibe. It was a brutal checklist. He trained, flew, survived, and did the work that turned impossible into documented. He walked on the moon in July 1969, not as a magician performing a trick, but as a pilot doing a mission with the whole world watching. That's why the moon landing conspiracy stuff doesn't land with him. It asks him to pretend his own memories are a prank. So when interview clips get twisted into proof the landing was faked, the real story isn't that he's hiding something. The real story is that he's tired of being used as raw material for other people's fantasies. Reuters has pointed out how certain viral edits stretch his words into claims he did not make, especially when people try to frame normal interview moments as admissions. That's not a mystery. That's mislabeling. And here's the part most people miss. When he talks about the future, his tone changes. It's like watching a person step out of an old photograph and back into the present. He lights up when the conversation moves forward, because forward is where he's always been aiming. That's why his real message is basically this: stop treating the moon like the end of the story. He's been one of the loudest voices pushing the idea that humans should go to Mars, and not in a vague someday way. More like, we need a plan, a timeline, and a reason that survives politics. He's advocated for Mars exploration for years, and he's even branded that push in a way you can't forget once you've heard it. It's not subtle, it's not spooky, it's a challenge. So ask yourself, what sounds more realistic from an engineer astronaut? A whispered alien confession, or a stubborn, loud argument that humans should become a multi-planet species? And here's a thought that hits differently when you zoom out. Maybe the reason people keep insisting on non-humans is because they can't imagine humans changing. But humans do change. We adapt. We build. We turn science fiction into normal life one boring step at a time. So let me throw you a question that sounds like a sci-fi twist, but it's actually grounded. What if the non-humans people want him to talk about aren't aliens at all, but future versions of us? People born off Earth are shaped by lower gravity, different skies, different risks, and a life where home is a planet we visit, not a planet we require. Would you even recognize a human who grew up under a pink Martian sunset? Would they still feel like us? Or would the distance alone make them feel like something else? That's the theme hiding in plain sight here. Panels to planets. A reflective rocket panel becomes a light, a Mars-Moon boulder becomes a monolith, and a 96-year-old astronaut becomes a character in a story he never agreed to star in. The internet keeps dragging him back into the shadow of Apollo 11, but he keeps pointing ahead, like he's still looking out a window, still hunting for what comes next. And maybe that's the real legacy, not the conspiracy, not the clickbait quote, the refusal to stop moving. So the next time you see a confession video, will you know how to spot the panel from the planet? So Buzz Aldrin didn't break the silence about aliens on the moon. He described a real sighting that was briefly unidentified, then explained it like an engineer, because that's who he is. The only non-human thing in this story is how algorithms twist a man's words into a monster movie just to keep you scrolling. Did this change how you see Apollo 11? Did you ever think that a monolith was on the moon? Share your thoughts in the comments.